I've had several people that I've been talking to about my garden, or that have been asking me about it, and both at work and in family. And so I wanted to, since not everybody could bring out and show them what I'm doing, I thought I'd videotape some things. I'm using a technique called the square foot garden, and as you can see, I don't keep a very neat yard, but I've got these three boxes, three raised bed gardens. The only one that I'm formally doing full on with the square foot gardening method is this one, where you'll notice I've got string across the top, and you can grid it in different ways, but making 1 foot by 1 foot grids. And my planting density is determined by the square foot. So I've got a guide that tells me for each thing that I'm planting how much density there should be in each square foot. Generally, pepper plants and tomato plants are going to be at most 1 per square foot. Other things like lettuce will be 4 to 6, or lettuce or spinach, they tend to be denser. But I've got I used the square foot gardening book as a starting point for knowing how dense to plant. This is going to be the first 16 box grids on this end will be okra when it comes up. I've planted the seeds. It might have been a little early. I'm not seeing any of them germinate yet, but I know some seeds are slow to germinate, so I'm giving it some more time. At the other end, in the middle, I've got 16 reserved for peppers, and some of them I started from plants, and they're coming up nicely, and others I'm trying to grow from seed, and again, I'm not really seeing them germinate, so they may have gotten too dry in the germination phase. Some of the things I started from plants, I guess I didn't have well established before I transplanted them. And then we have the 16 squares that are more or less tomatoes. Now, they're not all tomatoes. I've got 9 plants here. And what I've done, they're going to grow vertically, and we have these frames. They're made out of just conduit with joiners on the corners. The way they're put into the ground is I think it's a 1/4 inch rebar, or maybe it's 3/8 inch rebar. Took a 2 foot long segment of it, and I would drive it. This is not one that I'm using for that, but I would drive them into the ground about that far, until there's about 1 foot sticking out, and then you can slide the conduit frames over the rebar to hold them upright. And then around the conduit, I've tied this nylon netting, and this is a nylon net that you can buy, and it's easier to use, and it's quick, and but it's a little bit expensive. Probably, if I remember right, about $16 for a big enough segment to make 2 of these. Or you can just get nylon twine, and this is one that I made a couple of years ago, where I just started at the top, measure out a long segment, usually about twice as long, maybe not quite twice as long as the length you're trying to measure. Fold it in half, and each half then would be that same length, and then loop it up here, and then I just tie a knot every place that it meets and make my own grid. This is going to be for gourds. Oh, let me show you my tomatoes. I've got 1 cilantro plant. I've got some zinnias in the middle, not zinnias, marigolds in the middle, because I've heard that they have pest repellent properties. And then I've got my indeterminate tomato plants, those that climb and climb and climb, on the outside edges, where I've got the frames, and hybrids on the outside edges. And I really need to do some pruning, because they recommend that when you're using this technique, that you only let 1 stem from each plant grow, and you prune off the branches, like this one right here. I'll come in later, especially since there's no fruit forming on it yet. And what I need to do is come out, well, I can probably do this one by hand. Just break that off, and I'll later take that and drop it in my compost. But I need to do some pruning, because it's gotten kind of out of control. These 2 on the end, they're not the indeterminate tomatoes. These are bush tomatoes, and so they tend to grow more vertically without the assistance of all the support. I do put cages around them just for a little extra support, and when those will grow as big as they grow, and then they'll stop, and you'll have the tomatoes, and they're not the kind that will tend to grow all through the summer or rebound in the fall. So once they're done, and I'll replace them with something else, or maybe with another type of tomato for the fall. So those are the tomatoes, and you can see I've got some that are looking quite nice, and then I've got some that are getting light colored, and they're going to start changing and ripening for me soon. Over here, I haven't gotten around yet to putting up the grids, and this one is predominantly my my leaf box. I was growing lots of lettuce and spinach in this box. Most of that's all gone. This massive plant, this is New Zealand spinach, and it's going to grow all through the summer. The texture when it's raw, the taste and texture is very different from spinach, but when it's cooked, it's almost identical to spinach. Very heat tolerant, and they call it edible landscaping because this is all one plant. It spreads, and I desperately need to prune it back and harvest it. It spreads and spreads and spreads. In fact, it's climbing over some other plants that I really want to thrive, and some that I don't. So I really, really need to harvest that before it chokes out some of the others that I want. Down here I've got another type of spinach. That's going to be a Zanzibar spinach, and it's a climber as well. And this is squash. We'll see how that does. I also have some little bitty starts of a plant called amaranth, which you may want to Google. Has an interesting history, and it has a genetic makeup that makes it very efficient in its use of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So it is actually one of the most efficient grain crops known to the world, better than corn and wheat. But it is, and it's, what are they, gluten-free. It's a gluten-free grain. But it's one of those plants that the nature of its seeds mean that it's not easily milled by mechanical means, and so it's not grown in mass quantities for human consumption. Oh, it is in, it's used a lot in South America and so forth. And there I've got a cantaloupe, and there I've got a watermelon, and some more squash of a different variety, and I frankly don't remember which I planted where, but I've got two different varieties, and eventually I'll know. And so I've got amaranth spread out where I don't have other things, and it's just now coming up. It's a salad crop, or you can grow it for the grain. I'm going to be growing it for the foliage for the most part. And this is one of my most successful plants this year. The Swiss chard just keeps giving and giving and giving. You can saute these leaves. Nan's gotten really good at cooking the Swiss chard. You can boil it like spinach, or you can eat it raw in salad, preferably the smaller leaves when you do that. I'm growing a couple of peanuts just for grins and giggles so that my son gets a chance to see how peanuts grow. And I've got some flowers mixed in here. They're not doing much. I've got a couple of corn seeds from a previous year's batch. They're not doing much. I've got spearmint, and I've got peppermint, and I've got garlic chives, and I've got onion chives, and I've got oregano. And that is the garden. Now, to put these beds in, I started out with some form of a ground cover. On a couple of them I used a black landscaping fabric. On some of them I used multiple sheets of newsprint, like 10 layers of newsprint. And then we came in with a soil mix that is similar to that recommended by the Natural Gardener book. In these two, I used a prepared mix from a garden center here in Austin called the Natural Gardener, where they made their own mix but made it by Square Foot Garden Principles. And I bought that. It's very expensive, so the third mix I just used the Natural Gardener's own soil. And it's going to be a little denser A little harder to work just with your bare hand, but it should be, I think it's going to be equally effective in terms of how the plants grow. Looky here, I did not expect those to be ready, but I believe both of those are ready to be picked. And there I've got a bell pepper forming. It needs to grow some more. So anyway, you lay down the weed barrier and then the soil inside the boxes. The boxes are just, I take a 16-foot long plank. These are, I believe, 2x8s, and I'll take 2 of them, cut 4 feet off of each one. That gives us 2 12s and 2 4s. And when I put them together using wood screws, I wouldn't use nails, they wouldn't hold very well. Use wood screws on the ends, then that gives you a 4-foot by 12-foot box. Very nice, very easy, very cheap. Had rabbits digging in my lettuce beds earlier, so I rigged up an electric fence. Got a nice little jolt of electricity going around there. Not deadly to anything, but it'll give you a little pain. And I'm working on the perimeter. What I want to do is come out and put down a weed barrier, which I tried cardboard, and clearly the grass grows right through the cardboard. So I want to put down a nice weed barrier in between each of the beds, and about 2 feet around each of the beds, and then a nice soft mulch on top of that to walk on. And so that's the next part of this project. Accompanying that is my compost pit. I just bought a standard bin, and right now I've got lots of gnats with it. Well, not so much. It is unbelievable how fast things decompose. I've been filling this for a year, and at times I've put so much yard waste and weeds pulled up from the yard that it filled the bin, and now we're down to, looks like I've got about 6 to 8 inches of material there. My problem is I don't have enough, because we don't have many trees in the yard, I don't have enough carbon sources, that would be leaves or chopped wood chips, to bulk it up. So the nitrogen sources just decompose to virtually nothing. So I need to probably get some free wood chips from the local recycling center and add that. So ping me with any questions that this video raises. Hopefully for my brother Brian and some others who've been asking, this will give you a start. Oh, one other thing I should note, I've had fits with my lettuce and spinach and Swiss chard. You'll notice some of these are pretty riddled with holes. Caterpillars love the leaf crops, and I found an insecticide that is completely safe. It's called BT powder. It's a bacteria that only has any effect when it's in the gut of a caterpillar. If you ingest it, it's harmless, and you dust the leaves with that. Caterpillar takes a few bites of a leaf that has that dust on it, and it's kind of gross to say, but it's almost like the caterpillar's form of Ebola. It just makes them juice up and bleed out with not of course scary red blood, but green goo, which is kind of gross, but it protects my leaf crops, and the caterpillar juices wash right off. So if it doesn't make you squeamish, it sure doesn't bother me, and it seems to be very, very effective as long as I keep that powder on, a couple of times, once every couple of weeks. So if you got any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer. Thanks. Bye.